Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Waugh. I'm going to discuss with you today using Internet of Things sensor devices and sanitary sewer networks. I'm going to talk with you about Pinellas County sewer system and problems that they have with their sanitary sewer overflows, how the Florida Department of Environmental Protection has managed those overflows in the past, and then how different agencies around the world have used Internet of Things devices to prevent and solve these sewer overflows. And then lastly, we'll go through a return on investment on if this type of system would be beneficial to the Pinellas County sewer network. The Pinellas County sewer network, or like most sewer networks in Florida, Pinellas County is located on the west side of Florida in the Tampa Bay area. We are the peninsula that extends down into the bay. You can see the green lines here represent our sewer network. And you can see that the Pinellas County Utilities Network incorporates about a third of the total county population. The pictures here will show you what a sanitary sewer overflow looks like. These are real overflows in the state of Florida, and it looks like just nice water coming out of the manholes in the street, but that is raw sewage that is coming up out of the manhole and flooding into the streets and homes and neighborhoods and ponds and lakes and rivers. So please, if you see a manhole overflowing the street, do not go wade in with your bare feet because it is raw sewage typically. In 2022, Pinellas County Utilities has 33 total sanitary sewer overflows. And you can see that these overflows are for a variety of reasons, like you might expect. Sometimes we have pipe breaks, sometimes we have mechanical failures of pumps, but by far the majority of overflows are due to obstructions in the sewer mains themselves. And those obstructions cause the flows to back up into the pipes, and therefore the pipe capacity is reduced and doesn't have the hydraulic capacity to convey the flow, and so it comes out of the top of the manholes. So as you might expect, it is of extreme interest to Pinellas County Utilities to try and predict where these obstructions may occur. This is just 2022 data, but as you might expect, this is kind of a yearly occurrence historically. Over time, FDEP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, has regulated these sewer overflows because they are a detriment to the environment. They can cause public health problems. So the sewage is intended to stay within the pipes. And because of our historical SSO problems, like a lot of counties and jurisdictions in Florida, Pinellas County was subject to a consent order by the DEP. And the DEP actually fines Pinellas County per day, per gallon of water that gets spilled out of these spills. Now, we don't spill every day, but when we do, we incur fines, as you see per the schedule. So I went through and looked at where other places of the world have started using modern technology to help prevent these SSOs from occurring. There were several places that have used AI, artificial intelligence bots, and machine learning to go through and look at just historical data to try to do predictions. There are places like the Kowloon area in Hong Kong. It's a neighborhood. They actually installed ultrasonic sensors that then send cellular signals up to a certain central database. And these sensors are measuring the flow of water and the height of the water column within the pipes. So essentially this becomes a smart manhole in a sense, and the manhole can then detect when the water is rising, which would indicate a blockage in the line, and then alerts could be sent automatically to crews saying, hey crews, go check out manhole 32 over on 5th Street. They've tried these, piloted these systems in Hong Kong. They've also piloted them in southern area of Australia and in several municipalities in America. The example here shown on the screen was in the Hong Kong neighborhood, and as you might expect, you can't put a sensor in every manhole. So what they did is they actually found what would be their 58 typical type manhole styles, and they put the artificial intelligence on top of the data provided from those 58 manholes, and were able to extrapolate the predictive blockages that occurred in their 58 typical manholes and extrapolate across their whole sewer system of several hundred manholes, and then predict where blockages would be occurring. So they, instead of putting a sensor in every single manhole, they were able to extrapolate data from a few manholes and then use that data to then go predict where blockages would be occurring. Other studies that have been done, one specifically funded by the American Society of Civil Engineers, wanted to check on the effectiveness of these ultrasonic level sensors and how they actually predict sanitary sewer overflows. The results of their studies show that 80% of the sanitary sewer overflows that were due to blockages could be predicted by these ultrasonic level sensors. And specifically when they use machine learning and AI bots on top of the data that's achieved. Other studies that were done through the American Society of Civil Engineers showed some cost feasibility of how much it would cost to install these sensors. And they looked not only just at the sensors, but the cost of the network, installation costs versus yearly maintenance costs. Of course, these things are in a sewer network, so that is a very toxic, corrosive environment. So there is some maintenance that occurs to the sensors because of where they have to be placed. So this kind of gives an overall gauge of how much it might cost to install a sensor network or a smart manhole system into a sewer utility. So then, to really evaluate, does it make sense to invest in these type of sensors and smart technology for a actual practical sewer system? I wanted to go and look at, well, what would I gain from installing these? So using the 2022 data, I created a kind of a minimum threshold and a maximum threshold. So in 2022, there were 33 total SSOs, which might mean that in a light year, 20% less SSOs might be 26 total, or in a heavy year, perhaps there might be 40 total SSOs. So I created three scenarios, a minimum, an average, which I assume 2022 was an average, and a maximum case scenario. Based on the data from 2022, it took about 2.5 hours to respond to the SSOs. Now, some of that response is in cleaning out the blockage, and the other part of the response is in cleaning up the mess that is caused. So if I could predict where they're going to occur, I would still have to spend the time to clean the blockage. But if I prevented the SSO, I wouldn't have the mess. So I said that I made an assumption that 40% of the total response time was actually cleaning up the mess, and the other 60% was the time to clear the blockage out of the line. So if I was able to predict it, I would only get 40% benefit from the actual time. And I also assumed a labor cost and equipment cost of about $850 per crew hour. And then every time an SSO occurs, they would occur the light fine of $500. Of course, as you saw in the earlier table, the much bigger SSOs have much bigger fines associated to them. So this is maybe an underestimate of typical fines. But you can see for the three scenarios that if I was able to prevent 26% of the SSOs and with 40% cleanup time and labor costs, that I would save $35,000 a year just in the cleanup effort of predicting where those blockages and SSOs would occur. And then in the maximum case, the maximum benefit might be $54,000 a year in savings from predicting the SSO events. That's all good, but we should also understand how much it would cost. So based on a review of the Pinellas County network, the size, in comparison to what was done in the Hong Kong study, I estimated that about 35 sensors would be needed to monitor manholes in the Pinellas County system that could then extrapolate out to the rest of the network for these predictions. And based on the study that was done by the American Society of Engineers on the costs of these, you could see that there might be an initial first-year cost to install 35 devices of about $117,000. And then there would be yearly ongoing maintenance costs of around $31,000. So when you compare the cost versus the benefit, you can see that for the three scenarios, over a 6-year planning period, in the light scenario, the costs outweigh the benefit. So even though it's good to prevent the SSOs, it would actually cost me more money to predict them than to just go clean them up when they happen. In the average year scenario, same thing, although it gets a little closer. But then in the maximum scenario 3, you can see that by year 5, I've actually achieved a return on my investment where I'm actually making more money in savings than it costs me to own the technology to implement prediction of the blockages. So this is an interesting analysis because typically in a municipal utility infrastructure, you're on a 5 or 6 year planning window. And as you might expect, the technology would improve every 5 years or so. So you don't want to predict out 10 or 100 years because by this time you would replace all your sensors with a newer, better version that hopefully would be better at the prediction or cheaper to install. So you want to make sure your financial models aren't too short or too long, and typically a 5 or 6 window is applicable for a municipality. So this shows that in the maximum case, there actually is a return on investment achieved, but in the average case, in the minimum case, it is actually not financially feasible to install these sensors. So really in conclusion, the research has shown, in the research that I conducted, that there clearly is a proven link to the blockages and the SSOs, and that the IoT sensors, when installed and combined with artificial intelligence and machine learning, can predict where these occur in multiple places around the world in the US. But based on the analysis for the size of the Pinellas County system and the number of SSOs that we have incurred on average, that is probably not financially feasible. But I do need to note that in my assumptions, you did not hear me talk about the actual cost of any environmental cleanup. So obviously cleaning up the roadway and spraying it down and making sure the roadway is back clean is the minor cost that I assumed in my study. But if you imagine an SSO actually contaminated a house or a lake and it created fish kills or algae blooms, there would be a much, much higher cost. So I did account for that, but if a further analysis could account for that, and that would change the return on investment and probably make it more feasible and cost feasible to install these. Also, you did not see me monetize any social reputation type costs that would be associated with the fact that, you know, a sewer system that spills a lot has a negative reputation within the community, within the state. Obviously, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection would start increasing fines over time if a utility was not able to get these things under control. So what is today a $500 fine might become $5,000 and then $50,000 as you move into the future, because they want you to stop these spills from occurring. So really, a more detailed analysis for the utility might take some of these other things into consideration. And we really want to validate, you know, the cost of the crew hours and the cost of the fines, get some real data in there instead of the assumptions I used. But really the conclusion showed that this is a valid method to evaluate should a IoT sensor device be used within a sewer system. Thank you.